The forgotten daughter. I've always believed that love isn't about words, it's about who shows up when you need them most. But in my family, love was something that came with conditions. And I learned that the hard way. My name is Clara Hayes, and I was the daughter my parents forgot they had, until they needed me. The beginning. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, I always knew my sister, Emily, was the favorite. She was radiant, talented, the kind of person who could walk into a room and turn every head. Even as kids, my parents made it obvious who shone brighter. When Emily got a B on a test, Mom baked her cookies to cheer her up. When I got an A+, she barely looked up from her phone. "You're smart, Clara," she'd say. "You don't need praise." But praise wasn't the point. I didn't want applause, I wanted acknowledgement. My father wasn't much different. He coached Emily's soccer team, took her to games, posted photos online calling her my champ. I was the quiet one, the artist, the dreamer, the one who spent hours sketching in my room. He'd pass by my door, peek in, and say, "You can't make a living drawing pictures, Clara. Focus on something real." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Before I tell you how my parents' favoritism turned into betrayal, and how I turned it into something beautiful, please subscribe. Because every story here is proof that pain can become purpose if you don't let it break you. The breaking point. When Emily and I both graduated high school, she got into a big university on a full scholarship. My parents threw her a massive celebration, banners, balloons, catered food, the whole town invited. When I got accepted into an art and design college, they said, "We can't afford 2 tuitions, Clara. Emily's education comes first. You can always go later." I wanted to scream. Later never comes if no one believes in you now. But I didn't. Instead, I got a job at a local diner, saved every dollar, and took online classes at night. Emily visited during holidays, bragging about her new life, her boyfriend, her sorority, her future. My parents hung on to every word, eyes glowing with pride. I'd sit there, invisible again, wishing they'd look at me with even a fraction of that warmth. And then came the night that changed everything. The wedding. Emily announced her engagement 2 years later. My parents nearly fainted with joy. They spent months, and their entire savings, on the wedding. Custom dress. Live band. Outdoor venue. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, I said yes, because deep down, I still loved her. But as the day approached, I realized I was only there for convenience, not family. Every decision, every compliment, every toast, all centered on Emily. I helped decorate the venue, arranged flowers, even designed the invitations. But no one thanked me. At the wedding, I watched as my father walked Emily down the aisle, beaming, proud, the perfect dad. And something inside me broke quietly. When they danced, my mother cried. And when the guests toasted the perfect family, I excused myself, walked outside, and promised myself something. One day, I'll build a life so bright they'll have to see it, whether they want to or not. The climb. I moved to the city a month later with nothing but 2 suitcases and a dream. I found a tiny studio apartment, barely big enough for a bed and my art supplies. I worked days as a receptionist and painted at night. It wasn't glamorous, it was survival. I sold my first painting 6 months later for $200. I cried when the buyer told me, "You have something real." That was all I needed, one stranger's belief. I kept going. More commissions came. One gallery show turned into 3. Within 5 years, I had my own design company, Hayes Creative Studio, specializing in interior design and mural art. Magazines called me a rising name in modern design. My paintings hung in hotels, restaurants, even city halls. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need my parents' approval. The call. It had been almost 7 years since I'd seen them when the call came. It was my mother's voice, shaking, hesitant. "Clara, we need your help." My heart froze. What happened? She sighed. Your father lost his job last year. Emily's husband's business went bankrupt. They had to sell their house. We don't have anywhere to stay. I didn't know what to say. These were the same people who told me art wasn't a real career, who forgot my birthdays, who cut me out of their pride completely. Now, they needed me. For a moment, I almost said no. I wanted to say, you chose her. Live with that choice. But instead, I said something else. I'll call you back. The decision. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the empty guest house I'd built behind my new home. It was beautiful, 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, garden view. I designed it for visiting artists or friends in need. And now, my parents were the ones in need. It was poetic, almost cruelly so. Part of me wanted them to see how it felt to live off my generosity after years of neglect. To walk into my space, my success, and realize what they'd thrown away. But another part of me, quieter, wiser, whispered, revenge won't heal what they broke. But grace might. So, I called back. You can stay in my guest house, I said. For now. When the people who once ignored you suddenly need you, what do? Do you show them kindness, or do you finally let them feel your pain? Keep watching, because what happened next was something I never saw coming. The arrival. The day they arrived, I stood at the door, calm and composed. My father looked smaller somehow, shoulders stooped, eyes tired. My mother forced a smile. You have a beautiful place, Clara. Thank you, I said. It's nice to finally hear that from you. They both looked away. I led them to the guest house, gave them the keys, and said, make yourselves comfortable. I'll check in tomorrow. As they stepped inside, I saw it in their faces, awe, guilt, disbelief. They were standing inside the life they said I'd never have. And for the first time, I felt the quiet satisfaction of being seen. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, stood by the window, and whispered, welcome home, Mom and Dad. I hope you like what the unworthy daughter built. But I had no idea that this reunion, born from pride and pain, would turn into something much deeper than revenge. Because what happened next would change all of us forever. The reckoning. The first week after they moved in was strange. We lived just a few yards apart, yet the distance between us still felt like miles. They were polite, overly polite. Thank you, Clara, this is wonderful, Clara, we don't want to impose, Clara. It was the kind of politeness that covered guilt like a coat of fresh paint over old cracks. At night, I'd see the guest house lights on through my kitchen window. Sometimes, I'd hear faint laughter, Emily's laughter, drifting from a video call. Yes. Even after everything, they still talked to her daily. The golden child had lost her house and her husband's business, but somehow, she was still the center of their world. And me? I was the roof over their heads, but not the one in their hearts. Ghosts of the past. One morning, I brought over some groceries. When I stepped into the guest house, my mother was arranging family photos on the shelf, all of them of Emily. Her graduation. Her wedding. Her baby shower. Not a single photo of me. I froze. She noticed my stare and tried to cover it. Oh, I packed whatever I could find. I smiled tightly. Don't worry. You didn't forget me. You never really remembered me to begin with. Her eyes filled with shame, but I walked out before she could speak. That night, I painted, something abstract, dark and raw, filled with color and chaos. It was anger, forgiveness, and grief all tangled together. I called it Unchosen. A week later, I sold it for $25,000. And for some reason, it didn't make me happy. If you've ever felt unseen, forgotten, or compared, hit subscribe. Because what you're about to hear next is proof that even when they don't choose you, life still can. Dinner table tension. One evening, I invited my parents for dinner. It was awkward, like dining with polite strangers. My father complimented the house. My mother commented on the decor. And then she said something that caught me off guard. "Clara, this place, it's so beautiful. You've done so well for yourself." Her voice trembled slightly. Pride, maybe? Or regret? I smiled faintly. "Thank you." I guess being the disappointment pushed me harder than I thought. Silence fell like a stone. My father set down his fork. "We didn't mean to make you feel that way, Clara." "You didn't mean to?" I said softly. Every decision said otherwise. He sighed, his hands shaking slightly. "We thought Emily needed more. She was fragile. You were always strong." I laughed, not cruelly, but bitterly. "You confused survival with strength, Dad." "I wasn't strong, I was alone." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We made mistakes." "Yes," I said quietly, standing up. "And I lived them." The breaking point. A few days later, Emily showed up. I hadn't seen her in years. She looked the same, confident, beautiful, but with the faintest shadow behind her eyes. She hugged my parents first, then turned to me with a hesitant smile. "Clara, it's been too long." "It has," I said flatly. She handed me a small wrapped box. "A little something for letting Mom and Dad stay here." Inside was a scented candle with a tag that read, "You're amazing." I almost laughed out loud. It was so superficial. But I just said, "Thanks." That evening, she joined us for dinner. And of course, my parents glowed like the sun had come home. They hung on her every word. Even as I sat beside them, I might as well have been a ghost. I felt the anger bubble up, old, familiar, poisonous. When Emily mentioned she was working on rebuilding her brand, my father said proudly, "You'll bounce back. You always do. You're our shining star." Something inside me snapped. "Funny," I said. "I thought the shining star was living in your guest house now." The table went silent. My mother whispered, "Clara." "No," I continued. "You can sit here and tell her how proud you are, how perfect she is, but let's be honest, if I lost everything, you wouldn't even open your door." My father's voice rose. "That's not true. Isn't it?" I said, trembling. "You left me to figure out life on my own. You told me I wasn't worth investing in. You made me believe love was something to be earned, not given." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Clara, please. Don't," I cut in. "You had their love. You still do. You don't get to ask for mine too." I stood up, heart pounding, and walked out. The letter. 2 nights later, I found an envelope on my doorstep. It was my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter. "Clara. You have every right to be angry. We see now how deeply we hurt you, not by what we said, but by what we failed to say. We thought love meant protecting the fragile, but we neglected the strong. We see you now, the woman you became, not in spite of us, but without us. You didn't need us to become who you are. But we need you to remember, we're trying to be better. Love. Mom." I must have read it 10 times. For the first time in years, her words felt real. That night, I walked to the guest house. The lights were off, but I saw their silhouettes sitting together, heads bowed, not in pride, but in humility. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected, pity. Revenge feels powerful at first. But power without peace is just another kind of prison. The shift. The next morning, I knocked on their door. They opened it cautiously. "Breakfast?" I asked softly. My father smiled, small, unsure. "We'd like that." We sat at the table, no speeches, no apologies, just pancakes and sunlight through the kitchen window. And in that quiet morning, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. They started helping around the property, tending the garden, cooking dinners, fixing small things. And I noticed how my father's hands trembled less each day, how my mother's laughter began to return. They weren't the same parents I'd left behind. Maybe they were finally learning to love without conditions. And maybe, just maybe, I was learning how to receive it. The turning point. Forgiveness is strange. It doesn't arrive with a grand announcement. It slips in quietly, in the pauses between anger and exhaustion, when your heart realizes that holding on hurts more than letting go. That's where I was. The unexpected visitor. It had been about 3 months since my parents moved into the guest house. Things were calm. We'd found a fragile rhythm, small talk over coffee, shared meals, unspoken apologies hanging in the air like fragile glass. But peace is delicate. It doesn't take much to crack it. One afternoon, as I was painting a new mural for a client, a car pulled up in the driveway. I wiped my hands and stepped outside. Emily. She looked different this time, tired, thinner, the sparkle dulled in her eyes. Her marriage had officially ended, and she had nowhere to go. Mom said I could stay here, for a while, she said softly. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Here? In my house? Not in the main house, she added quickly. Just with them. In the guest house. I wanted to say no. Every part of me screamed no. But then I saw her car, the back seat filled with clothes, boxes, and a small sleeping child. Her son. My nephew. He peeked at me through the car window, big brown eyes full of confusion. And I sighed. All right, I said. But just until you get back on your feet. She nodded with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Clara. I didn't respond. Old patterns return. For a while, it was civil. My parents were overjoyed to have their daughter and grandson close again. But soon, the old patterns crept back. Dinner conversations turned into stories about how well Emily was handling single motherhood, how proud they were of her resilience. It was déjà vu, the same pedestal, the same blindness. One night, I overheard my mother say, Emily just needs a little help getting her career back. Maybe Clara can connect her to her clients. I froze outside the window, my heart pounding. The anger, the kind I thought I'd buried, came roaring back. I stormed inside. Do you hear yourselves? I snapped. You're doing it again. You're giving everything to her, and expecting me to fix it. My father looked startled. Clara, that's not what we meant. Yes, it is, I said, shaking. You used me to survive. Now you want me to be her savior too? Emily stood up, clutching her son's hand. I didn't ask for this, Clara. You didn't have to, I shot back. You never do. You just exist, and they rearrange their world around you. My mother whispered. Please, not in front of the child. Exactly, I said coldly. You always care about appearances. Never about the truth. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Have you ever realized that the people who hurt you once are just repeating the same pattern, over and over? What would you do, walk away, or finally make them see? The breaking silence. For days, I didn't see them. The guest house curtains stayed closed. No laughter, no sound. Part of me felt vindicated, they needed to hear it. But another part felt empty. Then, one night, a knock echoed at my door. It was Emily. Her eyes were red, but her expression was calm. Can we talk? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She sat on my couch, hands trembling slightly. You were right, she said quietly. About everything. I blinked. What? Mom and Dad, they did put me first. All my life. And I let them. I didn't see what it did to you. I just thought that's how families worked, that love had to be earned, and I was good at earning it. Her voice cracked. But it ruined me, Clara. They protected me so much I never learned to stand on my own. When things fell apart, I didn't know how to survive. She looked at me, eyes glistening. You did. You figured it out. You became everything I wasn't brave enough to be. For the first time, I saw her, not as my rival, but as another victim of the same broken system. I felt the anger in me start to loosen. Emily, I said softly, I didn't want your pain. I just wanted to stop being invisible. You're not invisible, she whispered. You're the one holding us all together now. And just like that, years of resentment cracked open, and what spilled out wasn't rage anymore. It was sorrow. We sat there in silence, two grown women who had spent their lives competing for scraps of love that should have been abundant. The illness. A few weeks later, my father collapsed in the garden. Dehydration, exhaustion, stress. The doctor said it was a warning sign. Sitting beside his hospital bed, I saw how fragile he'd become. The man who once told me art wasn't a real job now needed me to pay his medical bills. He looked at me weakly and said, "You've built something beautiful, Clara. I should have believed in you sooner." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You still can," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "I do. I'm proud of you, kiddo." It was the first time he had ever said it out loud. And even though it came decades late, it still mattered. Sometimes, the apology doesn't come when you want it, but when you're finally ready to receive it. If you've ever waited for someone to say, "I'm proud of you," don't forget to subscribe. You'll find stories here that remind you, your worth doesn't depend on their words. A different kind of home. When my father was discharged, I converted part of the guest house into a small art studio, just for him. He'd always loved tinkering, fixing things, building furniture. Now, with his hands shaking slightly, he built small wooden frames for my paintings. My mother started cooking for my staff, bringing homemade meals to my team. For the first time, my company became a family, not built by blood, but rebuilt by forgiveness. And Emily? She started working with me, managing my clients, using her natural charisma for something good. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, she turned to me and said, "You know what's funny? They used to say I was the shining star. But now, I think I was just reflecting your light all along." I smiled. Maybe we both just needed to stop competing for the same sun. Peace. Months passed. The guest house that once represented irony and revenge had become something else entirely, a place of reconciliation. Some nights, I'd hear laughter drifting through the open windows. Not the kind that once excluded me, but the kind that invited me in. And every time, I'd pause by the window, close my eyes, and smile. Because this time, I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was home. The full circle. They say the past never really leaves you, it just waits for an invitation to return. Sometimes the invitation is a photograph, a smell, a song. For me, it was a headline. The unexpected headline. One humid morning, I was sipping coffee in the studio when notifications started flooding my phone. Clients, friends, even strangers were sending congratulations. I frowned and opened a news link. My newest mural, the one on the exterior of the city library, had been featured by a major design magazine. The headline read, "Clara Hayes, from small-town girl to city visionary, how one artist rewrote the rules." Underneath was a glossy spread of photos, my mural in rich detail, my studio, and a brief profile about Hayes Creative Studio's mission. At the bottom, a single line called out my backstory, how I left home, the struggle, and the irony of the guest house where my parents now lived. My heart raced. Fame wasn't why I'd painted that wall, but it came anyway. The press call. Within an hour, my PR manager said there was an invitation to speak on a morning talk show. Producers wanted a short segment, the woman who built a creative empire after being passed over at home. I hesitated. Saying yes meant putting the whole story back into public view, the old wounds, the family drama. It meant my parents' choices would be visible to thousands. But Ethan, steady, practical, loving, took my hand. "You tell the story you want to tell," he said. "The one about how you built this. The rest is context." So I agreed. They chose her. They ignored me. Then my name was everywhere, and suddenly they wanted to be a part of the story they'd written me out of. The morning show. Under studio lights, I talked about paint, composition, and the bridge between public art and public good. I kept it crisp, professional. I spoke about the apprentices I'd hired from the neighborhood and the free weekend classes Hayes Creative launched for kids. Then the host smiled and asked the inevitability question. "Your parents live in your guest house. Did you ever think you'd be in this position?" The camera tightened on me. For a second, I felt the old instinct to shrink. But the years had taught me to use the spotlight like a tool, not a trap. "No," I said honestly. "But life is messy. We hurt each other sometimes. We also get the chance to fix things, if we want to." The segment wound down with applause and the usual social links. I stepped off the set to dozens of messages, some warm, some blunt. One in particular caught my eye, a short note from my father. "Proud of you. Call when you can." I read it twice, then 3 times. For the 1000th time, I realized that words can change slowly, and sometimes they do come when needed. Public acknowledgement. A week later, my parents' neighbor posted a video of my mother walking people through the Guesthouse garden, pointing out the mural photos, and talking about her daughter's incredible work. The clip was sweet, and unexpectedly tender. Then, my mother did something that surprised everyone, including me. She went on her small community page and wrote a post. "To my daughter Clara, I was wrong. For years I compared and I failed to see. Today, I see. I am proud." It was simple and imperfect. People shared it like wildfire. Friends messaged me screenshots and "We're so proud of you, Clara" notes flooded in. My phone chimed with one more message that night, from Emily. "Can we talk?" The test. That evening, the 4 of us, my parents, Emily, and I, sat at my long kitchen table. It was the same table I'd painted myself when I first started the business. Years of meals had worn grooves into the wood. The house smelled like garlic and roasting peppers, Mom's new favorite menu items. My father cleared his throat and said, in that tentative, old man voice I'd grown up with, "I wrote something earlier. I wanted to say it to you first." He looked at me. "Clara, I was proud when they wrote about your mural. I'm proud now. I am sorry for the way I ignored you, for assuming. I can't change the years, but I want to change the rest." There it was, a public apology turned private. My chest loosened. Not because the pain vanished, but because the offering was real. He'd come to me, not for forgiveness as a requirement, but as a hope. Emily reached across, grasped my hand. Her voice was small. "I see you now, too. I always loved you. I didn't understand the difference between our needs. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you." For the first time, I didn't feel the burn of performance. I felt the slow warmth of something opening. Revenge reconsidered. The revenge plan I'd written in my head, the quiet lessons I'd planned to teach them, began to feel petty. There's a short-lived sweetness in holding someone's pain up like a mirror, in making them notice what they ignored. But there's no sweetness in living inside anger forever. That night, alone in the studio, I thought back to the early days, the studio's cold floors, the first buyer's stunned face, the late-night emails from kids thanking me for a free workshop. Everything in me had grown beyond the need to punish. My choice now wasn't about erasing the past. It was about deciding who I wanted to be in the aftermath. I wanted to be generous. Not because they asked for it, but because generosity was the only language that could rebuild us. If you're learning how to turn hurt into strength, please subscribe. Stories like this remind us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the final, brave work of the healed. The offer. A few days later I called a brief family meeting. We sat in the garden by the mural, late afternoon sun pooling gold across the paint. I shared an offer I had rehearsed carefully. "I'll keep the guest house," I said. "And I'll help you get back on your feet. But this has to be real. No favorites. No pedestal. I want effort. I want responsibility. And I want honesty." My parents looked at each other, then at Emily. She nodded. My father's eyes brimmed. "We'll try," he said. "We promise to try." It wasn't a contract that fixed decades of hurt. It was a beginning, imperfect, earnest, and human. It was also the moment I realized revenge had been replaced with a different, harder power, the power to call people into better versions of themselves. Full circle. Months turned into a rhythm of small healing, homemade Sunday dinners where everyone cooked together, Emily volunteering at Hayes Creative to learn the administrative ropes, my father building frames and learning to speak differently about my work, my mother running a small hospitality program for visiting artists, a job she'd become oddly good at. People saw the pictures online, commented about family goals, and I'd smile at the captions. The irony that life served as both teacher and student was not lost on me. The guest house, once a symbol of poetic revenge, had become a site of renovation, for the house and for hearts. One evening, as we cleared plates and laughed at a joke Emily told badly, my father said casually, "You know, Clara, we made many mistakes. But we kept trying. Maybe that counts for something." I looked at him and replied, "Trying is better than pretending. And sometimes it's the only way home." We all paused, and in that pause was an unspoken agreement. We would continue to try, imperfectly, persistently, and we would do so together. The quiet power. Years later, people still ask me whether I regret taking them in. Whether the guest house brought more drama than peace. My answer is always the same. I don't regret it. I took the power I'd earned and used it to teach. I could have let them sleep on the sidewalk of their mistakes, but teaching them how to build a new life, that was the true lesson. It taught them humility, and it taught me mercy. There's a special kind of redemption that doesn't come from public vindication but from the private work of showing up, even when you don't have to. I still carry the old scars. I still remember the nights they weren't there. But my life now is fuller for the space I made for healing. I learned that revenge can feel righteous, but redemption is quieter, and its rewards last longer. They chose my sister once. I was hurt, angry, and I imagined revenge. But life offered a better choice, to be the one who leaves a light on. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories about how hardship can become the beginning of grace. And remember, forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It frees the future.